Hello, I am Andre Martin from the family Slade. In 2014, together with my gorgeous bride Katerina Krizanyova, we published a book, Where to From Here, Cognition, which we claim to be the book of absolute truth. Amongst other things, we also published a new definition of heliocentrism, and I'm here to explain that to you. We have a paper on academia which seems to have been accepted by the academics to some extent, but it doesn't seem to have made its way into humanity's discussion on climate change, which is directly related to heliocentrism. And hopefully with what I am doing in these videos on heliocentrism, we will get some clarity on what is happening with Earth, why climate change is busy happening here. It also may shed some light on prophecy, things like the end times, and really also give a lot of clarity to understanding the Bible and Scripture or Gnosis a lot better. But first, before I carry on, I would like to thank Blender for this awesome free program, and the people on YouTube who have posted so many tutorials, which without I would not have been able to do this. It's not an easy program to learn, so the graphics that I have come up with to this point are maybe very basic, so with time I'm sure I will be able to improve them. So let's get on with it. Heliocentrism is only recently accepted, or relatively recently accepted, but before they used to believe, the Roman Catholic used to believe that geocentrism was the correct model of our journey in the universe. And when people started coming up with the concept of heliocentrism, the first guy in recent times was in 1543, Copernicus, who said that the sun was actually the center of our solar system. And Galileo Galilei agreed with him. He was placed under house arrest because the Roman Catholic Church really wanted to put a lid on heliocentrism. They didn't want to be proven wrong, and he was persecuted for advocating that. Another guy, poor old Giordano Bruno, was actually burnt at a stake because he agreed with Copernicus and Galileo. So there's a very staunch reason why they felt this way, and as I said, we would have a very different understanding about prophecy and end times if we understood better how Earth moved around the sun. So as a young boy, I used to study the sky quite a lot, and I came to some conclusions that Earth really moves very slow around the sun because I could see the same stars every night. Here we have Orion's belt, and we use the Southern Cross to navigate the exact south point in the southern hemisphere. And these stars are usually available for us to view every single night. So what is happening? What makes us believe that Earth goes around the sun once a year when we have the same stellar picture? This is what I couldn't understand. So let me explain why. Here I've put a little graphic of Earth being shielded, the dark side of Earth, with the sun on the opposite side. But these three little white dots here is really what I would made there to depict Orion's belt, and we would see Orion's belt a certain 9-10 months of the year, which it never really leaves our vision It's just that we are altering the shadow that Earth has in our solar system. So that's one of the reasons why we went so seriously into finding an answer as to why Orion's belt is visible most of the year, and some point it disappears for a short period of time. But predominantly we see the same stars in the sky at night. So I've marked this now as the 0 degree point to be able to explain it a little bit better. I've also used the 1st of April, which is really actually the beginning of our year, which is directly attached to the Queen of Heaven, or the Daughter of Zion, Yaldabaoth, Inanna, Lady Liberty, or Gaia, if you like, who was born on the 31st of the 3rd month at 11:11, which marks the beginning of human consciousness. And if we were to move 180 degrees in the opposite direction, we would really see a different view of the sky entirely, and not the same picture as we do at the moment. So as it is right now, the specification says that we move 1 degree every 72 years, which already disproves that we're moving around the sun once a year. So on 180 degrees, we would be looking in the opposite direction into the night sky. So we must realize that Earth is this, that our solar system or the galaxy is this disk floating in space. And the reason why it is a disk like that is because all celestial objects would go and hang around the most neutral point in their magnetic field. The magnetic field here is really dictated by an equatorial plane between a north and a south pole. That equatorial plane being the neutral point. So I have this philosophy about God's design and how everything really functions, is that everything in Earth, everything that we have from the atom to the galaxy, revolves in a spiral orbit. And that spiral is evident from Fibonacci. When we generating electricity, Nikola Tesla specified the sine wave as being the best way to transfer electricity from one place to the other, and everything happens in this spiral, a never-ending spiral. And Earth, the sun, the galaxy, the moon around the Earth, everything is dictated by a spiral. So if we look at the spiral that happens in the proximity of Earth that we can see, we will see that Earth moves in a circle from east to west. The sun, or the moon, circles Earth from east to west. Now there's a reason for that happening that way, because there is a magnetic field that is owned to Earth, which floats in outer space in her own basket, which is her own magnetic field because of Earth rotating. And Earth rotates because it has a liquid core which will move in the opposite direction to what the outer side of Earth moves. This is just one of the most evident examples of the duality of God's design. And everything is in duality. Everything has an equal opposite. Like, for instance, the equal opposite to the Earth is the moon. The equal opposite to man is woman. Everything has an equal opposite. So without equal opposites, nothing is possible. So when the moon moves around the equatorial plane of Earth, it really crisscrosses between the north and the south pole. And by doing that, it has to flip polarity every 14 days. That polarity flip really changes the magnetic field of the moon to one polarity or the other. So if it is in the bottom, then it would be south polarized, and if it is north, it would be monopolarized by north. And this is something that happens everywhere in any of these spirals. There is also something else that happens on Earth, which we know as solstice north and south, which really says that Earth is moving in its spiral, and it is moving at an angle as opposed to its light source, which gives us our north and our south solstice every year. And it fluctuates or changes by 47 degrees in total, being 23.5 degrees north or 23.5 degrees south. Now, that is also dictated by a specific orbit. This orbit is really where the misconception of Earth traveling around the sun comes from. But I'm not going to discuss this in this lecture. Here I'm just proving that Earth cannot move around the sun in 1 year. So that fluctuation that we see is really partly dictated by our magnetic pole as opposed to the geographic pole. And the magnetic pole is what is really causing a part of the shift between our north and our south solstice. So it's dictated as or it's measured as about approximately 11.5 degrees, where Earth's magnetic pole differs from the geographic pole. The geographic pole is obviously where, if you have an axis, it would be rotating around that specific point. But here, it's evident from the shift in north and south solstice that it is not stable. So that wobble happens in a specific orbit, and this orbit is not attached to our orbit around the sun, although it is perceived that way because we have two equinoxes, which really says if there's an equinox, we are crossing the equatorial plane. And as I said to you before, the equatorial plane is the difference between north and south. So if the moon is orbiting around the sun at an angle, around the Earth at an angle of 5 degrees, then really it is changing polarity from the North Pole to the South Pole at equinox. So if we look at the orbit that is dictated by heliocentrism, believed to go around the sun once a year, then we must realize that Earth is traveling at an astronomical speed of 66,600 miles per hour, which is exceptionally fast. In fact, it is as fast as a comet, and it goes at an angle of 8 degrees, which would in part dictate the shift of the light from the north hemisphere to the southern hemisphere in part, but it's not, 8 degrees doesn't give us enough angle to justify the 47 degree change. So there is something else at play there. If it were to be by this orbit and the angle that we orbit the sun, then it would have to be an angle of 23.5 degrees, which it's not. We know for a fact that it's 8 degrees. So if we look at the sun, we also see the sun has this basket that is the magnetic basket that holds our solar system together. And that basket is really the place where all our planets would hang around in the equatorial plane of that specific basket. So here you will see that Earth is going around the sun in crisscrossing the equatorial plane, which is the blue field that you see there between the South Pole and the North Pole. I've made the South Pole on top because if we say Earth is north, then we will be attracted by the South Pole, and vice versa when we're in the opposite hemisphere. So if we change polarity from the present polarity that Earth has, it will be just attracted by the opposite pole again. So the distance that we travel in our orbit, which is pretty much a given, is 940 million kilometers. But as heliocentrism stands today, it says that we do so in 365.25 days. That gives us a speed of 2.6 million kilometers per day, distance traveled 2.6 million kilometers per day, a speed of 107,305 kilometers per hour. So really how that would look if we were to make a graphic of that, which I found on YouTube, it would look something like this. And if we consider this for a while, then you'll see that we are traveling as fast as what a comet would be traveling on its average speed, which is about 60,000 miles per hour. And when it goes around the sun, it would slingshot the comet and accelerate it to 100,000 miles per hour, which is very fast. It leaves this vapor trail, and Earth doesn't seem to leave a vapor trail. And something else that would happen is that were Earth to move that fast, the moon wouldn't be able to keep up with Earth, because the moon would have to travel faster than 66,600 miles per hour to be able to get from the one side or from the back of the Earth to the front of the Earth and cross in front of the Earth, which really would be impossible. I found this little experiment on YouTube, which really shows us how the moon would orbit the Earth. It's very interesting to see that when the main magnet, the big magnet here would be Earth, and the little magnet would be the moon, as I'm trying to define it. This will give you a very good example of how it would happen were Earth to move that fast. And if you see, you'll see when he moves the big magnet, then the moon catches up. But if the Earth were moving at 66,000, then it would be impossible for the moon to keep up. So really what we have is a moon that's orbiting Earth pretty stable. There is a fluctuation or variation in the orbit, because if I look out of our kitchen window, then certain times of the year I can see certain times of the Earth's the moon's orbit, I can see the moon through our window at full moon, and at other times the moon has moved to the northern hemisphere. So there is something else there that is happening that doesn't necessarily agree with Earth moving around the sun at a speed of 666,000 kilometers. There is something else happening, which I will explain in the next lecture. Right now we're just focusing on disproving the current definition of heliocentrism. So what is the general consensus here? If Earth were to move around the sun in 365 days, it would really lose the moon and crash into the moon a year later, because the moon would stay behind. It would lose that magnetic field. And then finally, last but not least, and the most significant thing that we know does not happen is that Earth does not go around the sun once in 365 days a year, because it does not flip polarity twice. If it did, it has to flip polarity at equinox. So for us to really understand this, we need to look a little bit further into history when Plato gave us a definition of a great year, or a Platonic year. This really is the most correct definition of heliocentrism, because this makes more sense than heliocentrism the way we have it. And it says that the period of one complete cycle of the equinoxes, which now the equinoxes are the points where we're crossing from a north to a south pole, which is then approximately 12,000 years apart, almost 13,000 years apart in modern years. And I say modern years for a reason, which I will explain in the next lecture. But for now, if we consider the 25,800 years, which differs by approximately 20% to carbon years, then we can already see that there is a discrepancy in carbon years, which really actually is the original timing of Earth. And I will also discuss that in the next lecture. But here we know that we have to cross the equatorial plane of the sun twice. So we start with one equinox, then we go through the next one, we flip polarity, and then we flip polarity again when we get back to the original point. So here I've given you a little graphic, and up top there I've written 22,600 years to complete one rotation. That is carbon years. So the carbon years is really what we should use, because Earth is dictated by the conditions that degrade carbon-14, and that is something that is pretty much the clock of Earth. This orbit would advance us 42,000 kilometers per year. So in knowing all of this, I have to add that God said to Adam that he was going to destroy Earth in 5 days' time. Adam was really worried about that, so he asked God, but why in 5 days' time? And God said to him, all right, well, it's not really 5 days for you, it's 5 days for me, but it's 5,000 years for you, which takes us to the time of Noah. And during Noah's time, we know that he faced the flood, which caused it to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And it said that it destroyed all of humanity, and that Noah's 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, were the only 3 left. And we know that this is not the case. We know that they all found wives, and we know that humanity didn't really go away. If we go and look at the Colburn Bible, we'll also see that it's written there that Earth faced this catastrophe that happened. So I have full understanding of that. So in the next episode of this heliocentrism, I will explain to you what happened during the time of Noah's flood, and I will explain to you exactly the effect that it had on Earth, which is why we are experiencing climate change the way it is happening right now. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. Goodbye.